ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to season 3. Can you believe it? I'm super excited that you guys are here every Sunday on the Daniel Hendrick Experience. Thank you for all of the emails and support and encouragement. It's really appreciated. Hey, for those of you who haven't become members yet, I would just ask that you go to danielhendrick.com and connect to Buzzsprout, where the podcast originates, and become a member. It's only $3 a month, and it helps to keep this podcast going so we can interview great opera singers from around the world. I thank you for that. And for those of you that would like to see the video version of this, please go to YouTube and type in the Daniel Hendrick Experience, and you can see the video version of these exciting interviews. Well, today, my friends, we have a very special guest, a tenor that I have admired for many, many years. He doesn't know it, but he's going to find out very soon when we chat. His name is Richard Leech, and he is a legendary American tenor who has sung at the Met, La Scala, Covent Garden, Vienna, Paris, Berlin, Rome, Florence, Madrid, Barcelona, Los Angeles, Chicago. I could go on and on and on. These are just some of the stages on which this American tenor has made his home. In a performance career spanning more than 4 decades, he's mastered dozens of the lyric roles of the French, Italian, and German rep, performing and recording with many of the greatest singers and conductors. Check out this review from the New York Times. Richard Leech's high notes fill the house effortlessly and excitingly. Other than Pavarotti on his best nights, I can't think of a tenor I'd rather hear in the part, referring to Richard's debut in La Boheme. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to talk to him. You're going to hear in the podcast that he and I have crossed paths in many ways that he doesn't know about, and so I'm excited to tell him about that. And ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance, pop over to danielhendrick.com. There you will see my history of singing opera around the world for many years, and also you'll see what I'm doing now, which is like this podcast, and also you'll see my book, Know You Know, which tells the story of my life's journey, the ups and downs of losing my voice early in my career and then getting it back and singing all over the world. So you can find the book at danielhendrick.com. So pop over there, pick up the book, and send me a note. Let me know what you think about it. So until then, I look forward to hearing more from you guys. And my friends, get ready, because this is going to be one incredible interview. And wait till you hear Richard's Nessun Dorma. It's out of this world. So beautiful, so lyric, so free. You'll see why that reviewer in New York talked about his high notes. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring in Mr. Richard Leech. Here is the legendary tenor Richard Leech. My brother, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Daniel. It's great to be here. I managed to have missed this opportunity a couple of times along the way, so I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it.
Yes. Well, a couple of your buddies recommended that you come on, and I'm like, Richard Leech would come on the show? Are you kidding me?
No, it's great. Happy to be here.
So I got to tell you one little story. I told you off the air that I had a story, but
I'm very frightened.
Yeah, it's all good for you, I can tell you that.
Okay.
So in your early days, you sang in the Caruso competition in Milano.
I did. Il primo concorso di canto Enrico Caruso per soli voci tenori.
Bravo. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
so you don't know this, but my teacher was Giuseppe Di Stefano. So he lived in the same building as the Caruso Museum.
Is that right?
Right there by La
Via
Scala.
del Uominoni.
Yes, exactly. And anyhow, he had heard me sing in Palm Springs. He took me under his wing.
Wow.
He was my mentor. And I went to Italy for the Caruso competition, and I had strep. And he passed me all the way through to the finals without ever singing a note. I had to walk out on stage and apologize to everybody.
Ah, gee.
And I lost my voice. And back then, they didn't know what spasmodic dysphonia was. But
Mm.
it took me about 8 years before I got my voice back and made my debut at Lincoln Center. Anyhow.
Wow, what a story. So we were singing it together?
I
No.
was t- I
Was it
was
that
at
first one?
I was at the second one.
A second, yeah.
And they told me that you sang Johnny Skiki, right?
I
That
did. I did.
yeah, and so they were bragging about you, and I'm like, I got to find out who this guy is. So like,
It was great. I was just taking, like any advantage chance. I saw the poster, sitting in the rehearsal room, and I
right,
said, you know what? For young tenors, this is perfect. I was tenors 20
yes,
under, and what a neat opportunity to go to Italy for the first time.
yeah, right. Well,
And then I tied for the top place with William Matteucci,
yes,
who
I
went on
have,
to have a wonderful career in Italy and beyond.
yes, yeah, yeah. Well, I also saw your broadcast of Rigoletto at New York City Opera that you did. And I must have played that Parmi like 100 times because it was so elegant the way you sang it. And like the review in the Times talked about that, it was your top was so easy. Did you have that naturally?
To a degree. I mean, frankly, when I started studying and I was then graduating school at 17 or so and went to Eastman, I went as a young, as a high baritone. My teachers, I don't know, we'll talk a little bit about my teachers along the way, Carmen and Peyton. Carmen spoke a
Aha.
bit. And I fell into their hands when I was about 15. And so at 17, I graduated from high school a year earlier and went to Eastman. And so, they wouldn't let me sing anything that was close to an opera aria or even particularly high, even though I could. And they were really careful with me for several years. It wasn't very long before I'm going like, no, I'm a tenor, please. And you know, I went back to Binghamton Tri Cities Opera, where I had grown up, and left Eastman and went back there. And so I was doing all the minor roles along the way there, and immediately singing tenor. And we would have a guest artist come in to do, Manrico, because it's not right for you, right? A small company. And, I'm like walking home down Main Street singing Di Quella Pia, going, here's how you do it. So it was always
Amazing.
sort of there. The top was always there. It was never it was not necessarily subtle.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
that my nickname was Ricky Screech for a reason.
Ah,
You
that's
could hear me.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, I pretty much always had access to the top. But I also had this careful mentorship taking me into my later teen years and into my early 20s. Well, all the way through my career until they passed away, each of them. So, I mean, they were my teachers, period, beginning to end.
Wow. Okay. So I also noticed because after Mario Lanza, I probably know your voice second, right? As the amount of hours of listening to somebody. So the way you approach the passaggio is very, very different. I don't know if you think that, but it's very different than most tenors. I don't hear you quote covering like a lot of guys do,
Yeah.
but I do hear you closing. Is that the way you think of it, or how did you process
Yeah, to a
that?
great degree. What's so difficult about both singing and teaching, now that I'm teaching, finding the language, finding the vocabulary that makes sense.
Right,
It's so
right.
tricky, open, closed. I mean, they can mean like totally opposite things in the same word.
Yes.
And so what's tricky is, early on I related, I was of course listening to a ton of Pavarotti, and his 77 broadcast of La Favorita changed my life, and so did his Lucia recording. And I said, "Oh, just do that." And so I related to it, and I recommend every young singer find a voice they relate to, not necessarily Pavarotti, not necessarily me. Find a singer whose voice you relate to and the way they're singing. Now, the difference is that Pavarotti, and I know you're aware of this very intimately, he would do this cover, but by the time he got to F, he was already fully covered. And
Yes.
I felt like it really showed. You could, sort of like it was highlighted, like I'm covering now.
Hmm.
Okay. And it served him very, very well. I
Yes.
felt much more, this is where open close gets really tricky. I felt much more open through the passaggio through F.
Hmm.
Okay. And, for instance, recondita armonia, right? Reco, do you close? It's a closed O, but is it a closed covered position?
Sound. Right.
Right. And that's the tricky part. And so
Yeah.
mine was much more what I would call, in terms of vowel, much more open, even in
Yes.
position. However, Carmen and Peyton always taught. Carmen was the technical teacher of the two. Peyton was a coach, but much more than a coach. Okay. And the I'd have to describe the technique or the position as closed. Okay, because it's all up here in this ventriloquist position,
Uh-huh.
never
Right.
opening and taking that open position up. So
Hmm.
it's open in a sense of not covered, but it's
Yes.
closed in a sense of the position of where
Hmm.
you're placing the voice up
Hmm.
in the place.
Yeah. Right.
Ah,
I get
and
what
then
I
you get to
get.
the top, and I love teaching about that because it's what's interesting to me is once you get up there, all the vowels are basically the same.
Yes.
They're all sort of they're just
Ah.
and they're big different vowels down low, and then as you go higher and higher and higher, they just become more the same thing.
Yes. And your eval was uniquely pure, though, compared to most tenors.
Yeah, I mean, I
Uh,
embraced it. I loved singing the E vowel, but it was in that place.
it was totally in
It
that
was in
place.
that same little place.
Yes. You know, Lanza
Okay.
had that in eval very similar to the
And I
way you did it
related to
yourself.
Lanza as well very much. As you may know, I
Hmm.
did a bunch of Lanza concerts and
Yes.
tributes and sort of really loved I don't know, loved how he related to Lanza. He was one of the first tenors I ever heard. My dad loved Mario Lanza, played records and stuff.
Yes.
And so it was sort of a the Great Caruso was sort of like watching it as a younger teenager before I ever started studying, going like, oh, you can do that, huh? You can go be a singer.
Uh-huh.
And it was when I was about 15. We happened to live next door to the director of the board of directors of the opera. And
Helpful.
the choir teacher said you should go take voice lessons. And so, we talked to our neighbor. He happened to be aboard. And so he called Carmen and Peyton, who said, well, we don't teach children. And which they didn't, but I went in for a lesson and they took me as a student, and the rest was history. It was really something.
Amazing. So, folks, you're going to hear Richard sing Nessun Dorma and also O Sole Mio in a little bit. And you're going to hear, if you haven't heard him before, which you probably have, but if you haven't, an elegance, a lyricism with color at the same time that just sounds so free. And when the New York Times talked about you, only second to Pavarotti, the way you sang your high notes in La Boheme with your debut, I can concur with that. And here's one of the stories I told you about. I am singing, I believe it was Hamlet with Tom Hampson in San Francisco Opera. Placido was singing at the same time, and you were singing Faust.
Mm.
Well, you were singing Salut de Mura, and here comes the high C at the end. Placido and I are just backstage watching you sing this aria. And I turned to him and I said, that fucker, it sounds so easy and so great. And Placido looked at me and he said, yeah, it is so easy and so beautiful. So there you go. You had two well, a super famous tenor and a not so famous tenor backstage just
That's incredible.
really enjoying your art on stage, which that particular performance of Faust that you did, I was backstage the whole time. You probably thought I was a stagehand.
I hope I was nice to you.
You were, and I did meet you another time, but well, I'll tell you that one later. But throughout my career, I have always been a tenor lover. So wherever I was
Sure. Of
singing around the world, if there were
course.
other tenors, I would ask, can I go into your rehearsal and watch
Yeah,
you?
right.
Just because for me, the tenor voice is the most glorious instrument God ever created.
Now, interesting insert here about Placido. He lived with my teachers for 6 months when he first came
Oh,
to the States. Worked with
wow.
Queen Peyton, sang Samson and Butterfly, I believe. Yeah. And so he
Mm,
lived in their extra upstairs attic room, worked with Carmen and Peyton, sang with the opera company. I mean, before he even went to Boston and then the New York City Opera. So it's a really interesting connection.
that
And
is. And did he learn that passaggio thing from them as well?
I,
Because he
I can
didn't,
assume, I mean, I can only assume it made a huge difference. Yes.
because he
But
didn't do the closing Pavarotti thing on the
right, right.
Fado.
No, he didn't. He had a rather unique,
Yes,
you know,
approach.
but it was this same up through. He had this always this What he didn't ever really quite find was the opening up at the top,
Exactly.
letting it go, and
Right.
pretty baritonal voice, and it
Yes.
didn't easily sing a C of even a B. He had to go find it, and he always found it. And the wide tongue and the
And the
whole
tongue.
you
Yeah.
can just see his tongue. And Carmen talked a lot about the wide tongue. But what I believe is that a tenor at the top, it's one thing through A and even B flat, but at B and C and above, you've got to what I call open the sunroof and let it go.
Mm.
You got to let it go. It's got to have
Mm-hmm.
an openness that's different than a beautifully placed B flat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a scary place, but it's what blossoms in my view.
Oh, and you definitely had that for
And
sure.
so, but yeah, so Placido was a part of my company back in 61, 62.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And when you were a little kid, did you like sing in church or anything? Or
Nope, never did anything, never sang anything. I'll say this. At 15, we had a player piano. I would sing with the player piano. It was really great. April Showers and all the classic player piano pieces. But nothing really. And I also went and bought a $15 guitar at Faye's drugstore and played 3 songs. But then when I was in ninth grade, and this is how I started with Carmen and Peyton, really, why the choir teacher said you should really go take voice lessons. I was in the choir and we were doing a concert with the stage band in the gym, and we did "Oh Happy Day," and I did the solo of "Oh Happy Day," and
okay.
it's all G's at the end, right? So here I am with a
Okay.
microphone in the gym with the band going, "Oh Happy Day," and Jesus, it's like blasting the place out, and my parents are going like, what just happened?" And so that's when we went to our neighbor, the president of the board of the opera.
Wow.
Right. And it just sort of happened. I mean, it just sort of happened. I wasn't singing tenor in the choir. I was singing bass in the choir and just sort of doing. That's when I joined at about the same time. I joined the opera chorus. We had a wonderful group that's still there called Summer Savoyards, which is a Gilbert
Mm.
Sullivan group that's been there for for decades now. And it's basically college age kids in the summer
Hmm.
putting on a production that's actually really decent in the real theater, and with the full orchestra and full set, full costumes, and work on it all summer and put it on at the end of the summer. So I started doing those when I was 15 as well. And so I
Mm.
was doing, I was in the chorus, and I did Samuel in, the assistant to the Pirate King and Pirates, and then all of a sudden I was doing the tenor roles every summer in Gilbert
Amazing.
Sullivan. So I've done like 8 or 9 of those. And that
That's
was
amazing.
amazing training, just experience.
Uh-huh.
While I was in the opera chorus, went away to Eastman, came back, etc., and then started doing, every small role in First Justice, and then Raymond Dotto. I signed Sia Bell.
Whoa.
Yeah, that
Well,
really pissed the Metzos off. I got to tell you.
I bet. And
Yeah.
what was your all-time favorite role that you enjoyed doing, if you
Ooh.
had one?
I'd have to say, I mean, doing Bohème always was, and Parpignol was my big debut. I skipped right over Prunier du Tour.
Wow.
Rodolfo. But I'd been in the opera three times before I did Rodolfo. I'd been around it. It was an old friend. So I mean, and by the time I did it the first time, I just felt like I knew it. It fit me. It was sort of medicine for me. For some,
Mm.
it feels big perhaps for a young voice,
Mm-hmm.
and it is. But I was still, I was well into my early 20s. I wasn't singing it at 18, 19. And by the time I was doing Rodolfo, it just felt great. So it's the role I always tried to debut with. I debuted at the Met. I debuted most of big houses in Bohème. And
Mm.
I'd be doing big repertoire or whatever I was doing. Going back to Bohème was like medicine.
Uh-huh.
And of course, as a piece, it's just so fun. It if it fits you vocally, it's just a dream. And the curtain goes up, and the next thing you know, the curtain comes down. It just carries you through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, and when I finally then I added Cavaradossi, loved singing Cavaradossi.
Mm-hmm.
When I added Don Jose, loved
Okay.
singing Don Jose. So satisfying a role.
Wow. Okay.
Both the dramatic range and vocal
Mm-hmm.
range is so satisfying. The Jose. So that became
Mm.
fun. As soon as I started doing that, I was doing it a lot. But I put it off. I put the Tosca off a bit. I put the Carmen off a bit. So I wasn't doing them before my, early 30s.
Got it. And you did Butterfly as well, right?
I did Butterfly. Butterfly fit me like a glove as well. I did that in Binghamton early on, and it just fit. And as a matter of fact, I always recommend to young singers, when you go to an audition, sing what you love to sing. Don't pay any attention to what they're doing in their season. Take
Mm-hmm.
something if you have it, that's great. But you get your first piece, sing what you love to sing. And then they'll
Yes.
ask you for the next piece that may relate to the repertoire. And I always
Yeah.
start with the addio. It just felt like butter to me.
Yes. I've heard you sing that too.
And
Beautiful.
I loved the character. I loved the role. You know,
Yeah.
I
Me too.
loved, yeah, it's fun. It's a great role.
Yeah.
You
Did you do
know,
that city opera production of the
I did
Butterfly?
City Opera way
Yeah.
back in. Yep, yep.
And I
And
did it. I did it after you.
yeah, and interestingly, I did the Bohème from City Opera. I
Hmm.
did it, and it was my debut there as well.
Wow.
Had been, it had been updated, of course, but it had initially been directed by Carmen Savoca.
Wow.
Yeah,
How fascinating.
and
Wow.
so these sort of circles of connections are quite remarkable. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Butterfly and Bohème were just like a fit like a glove. I didn't move into a lot of bigger Puccini. I'm like I said, I moved into Cavaradossi, but um, Tosca was about it. I didn't want to go move into
Mm.
Fanciulla. Now, having studied Fanciulla more later in my career, I probably wish I'd have gone to it sooner because
Mm.
it looks like fun too. But those ensembles are big and the orchestrations are huge.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to put myself in that position.
Yes. Manolisco as well, probably,
Yeah,
right?
Manolesco. I was supposed to do Manolesco.
Mm.
I had decided to add Manolesco. Also very difficult and big. But
Hmm.
to reopen the Kennedy Center there, as a matter of fact, with it. Placido asked me to reopen the Kennedy Center with it. After we
Wow.
did. And I couldn't because I was scheduled for Butterfly at the Met. And I
Wow.
said, look, I'm not going to ask Joe Volpe to be released. So if you'd like me to do the Manolesco, I'd love to, but you're going to have to ask Joe.
To get me to like,
Yeah,
got
I
it.
said, look, I try to instill in young artists, you know, you only you've got to be as true as you can to your word. If you say you're going to go do something, you should be going to do it
Hmm.
one way or another. Or you get to have a
Yes.
real conversation and 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 are told by the other person, look, you need to go do that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
the proliferance of cancellations for a better gig are tough. and it hurts companies. It hurts your relationship with companies,
Absolutely.
I believe.
Well, if you don't mind, let's play Your Nessun Dorma for everybody. So
Cool.
I
I'll
would
tell you
like,
a bit about this Nessun Dorma before you play it.
please.
I had never sung it, and I didn't do the role because again, it fit that category of bigger than I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the aria. Everyone knows the aria. Everyone loves the aria, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was doing this recording for Telarc, Classics of the Silver Screen, and they
Mm-hmm.
wanted the Bohème and they wanted Nessun Dorma.
Mm.
And I said, okay, and because they're doing other things. Catherine Malfitano was on and sang beautifully, and then other orchestral pieces that are in movies, things that are in movies. And so I learned Nessun Dorma for this, and it was really the first time I was singing it, and that's
Mm.
this recording I believe that you have, and I said, well, this is fun. This is
Mm-hmm.
really cool. I think I'll do this again. So that's that
Excellent.
recording.
And folks, you can go to his website, richardleech.com, and his history is there and some special recordings, which we're going to hear the Nessun Dorma right now. So let's play it.
Super.
Nessun dorma, nessun dorma. Futura principessa nella tua fredda stanza, guardi le stelle che tremano d'amore e di speranza. Ma il mio mistero è chiuso in me, il nome mio nessun saprà, no, no, sulla tua bocca dirò quando la luce splenderà. Ed il mio bacio scioglierà il silenzio che ti famiglia.
Damn, boy. Wow. No way. There is that openness through those
Right. It just
F's
sort of
again.
open up to the top.
And then the top just goes similar in a way to what Pavarotti does on his extreme high notes.
Right. He lets it go. He lets it go up there.
He lets it go. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
You got to get your hands off of it.
It's got this primalness to it, which is
Yeah.
really, really fantastic. Bravo, brother.
Fun. Thank you. I appreciate that.
What an awesome career you've had.
It's an interesting example of Carmen instilled in me, both Carmen and Peyton instilled in me this need to sing with your own voice. Don't go try to sound, I didn't try to sound like Di Stefano or someone, right, or even Pavarotti, because his it's very different in the middle and the upper middle as we're
Hmm.
discussing. Mine's very, it's just the size it is as it is, the little bit of vulnerability in it, whatever that is, just sort of speaking.
Hmm.
Peyton loved to quote Kirsten Flagstad, where when she said, "Singing is speaking on pitch,"
Hmm.
and so it's
Hmm.
not exactly, not totally true, but it's pretty damn true.
There is a lot of truth in that.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
so I always worked hard to try to find my own voice in a piece, whether a full role or a piece. Yeah,
Well, you sure did
fun
it
stuff.
there.
Fun
Kudos.
stuff.
Yeah. You know what I was marveled at your instrument, because I heard you in the house quite a few times too over the years. The quality of your voice is so lyric in a way, but yet it just filled the opera house. It never sounded like you were pushing it.
Interesting dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It, and I don't know that I can add much to our sort of knowledge base of it, but it is that aspect of if you're true to that core, that honest center of your voice, it's what goes through. We look at an oscilloscope and it's the narrow ones that go zing.
Hmm.
It's the wide ones that sound big if you're standing next to you, but not the ones that carry to the back of the house. And it's that sort of center of the tone that just sort of
Mm.
goes.
Hmm. Love it, man. That's
I pushed every now and then. I'll tell
yeah.
you a wonderful story, and Placido won't mind at all, I'm sure. I was with the wonderful late Jerry Hadley. We were both at City Opera
Hmm.
doing doing everything, and we went to see Placido at the Met do Rigoletto. And so we were just like, "Oh, this is great." We went backstage. Neither of us had ever met him yet, and so we went backstage, and Jerry says we got to the door, and Jerry says, we met and all of that, and he said, and he knew that I was with Carmen and Peyton, and he knew that. But so Jerry says, "Please, Maestro, I have to ask you. You know, we both sing this role over at City Opera, and the spot in the quartet is so hard, Santina, and then you got to repeat it, of course,
Yeah.
right? And you just go through it. You just sail right through that thing. Is there a secret you can help us with?" He says, "I tell you," touches our shoulder. "I tell you, at this point in the opera, I push just a little." And it was pretty damn good advice.
Wow. That is wonderful. Wow, brother. That is a great story. Just one story for you, and then we got to go. But
Sure.
I was at City Opera making my debut in Mephistopheles with Mark Delavan, and we were in the cafeteria at the Met, and Marilyn Horne was there eating, and you walk in, and Mark knows that I was a fan of you. He's like, "Go up and talk to him, say hi." And I'm like, "No, there's no way I could do it." So I didn't. I chickened out, but
Oh, no.
I just want you to know what a great fan you are, and the ultimate respect for the career that you've had. It's
Well, it was
amazing.
really just a career I almost never could have dreamed of. You just sort of walk through another door and try to be true to everything you believe.
Hmm.
It's this incredible balance of arrogance and humility to go try
Hmm.
to do this. I only want to add, just perhaps finish with, now I'm teaching. I'm at George Mason University in Fairfax, and I'm getting to stage the operas there with what's called Mason Opera, and I am having
Wow.
the time of my life now, in a way that I never would have imagined would at
Awesome.
this moment in my life. And so I really appreciate your wonderful podcast and you talking about singers and singing and the process and the journey. It's really important, and young singers getting a little view of that and a little perspective on what that's like.
Well, if you don't mind, let's play your O Sole Mio real quick.
You betcha.
Che bella cosa, una giornata sole, un'aria serena dopo una tempesta, per l'aria fresca pare già una festa. Che bella cosa, una giornata sole. Quando fa notte o sole se ne scende, mi venne quasi una malinconia. Sotto a finestra poi arrestaria. Quando fa notte o sole se ne scende,
Wow, what an awesome O Sole Mio. And once again, the way you handle that upper part of your voice, the mana, and you do a trill there, which was
It's
fantastic.
all That's all Pavarotti's fault because
Yeah,
we all
yeah.
got used to it when he was
Exactly.
playing with it. And my producer, wonderful producer Bob Woods, was not so sure that was a good idea. And I said, but I almost can't sing without it. It's absolutely the way I hear it. It also does a wonderful thing for your voice. I actually teach and warm up with the arpeggios up to that little one step turnover, and it really, if you want to go up to a note, do that one step up to the next note, and it really sets that then you're looking for even better. So it actually, to me, ended up being a bit of a vocalese in the long run.
I can understand
Fun.
that.
And
And
people have a blast with it, and, of course, listening.
yeah, and you do it flawlessly. Does it feel like it helps to lighten the voice in that part when you're doing that?
To a great degree, because in this instance, you're talking about a G and an A.
Exactly.
Did I do it in A?
Yeah, it was in
I
the key of
raised it.
G. So
The
you're
key of
singing
G,
the
yeah.
G, and then it goes up to
And
the
A.
A.
And so it's easy to have too much baritone in your G as a tenor, and it's really dangerous. Right? It doesn't exactly set you up for your A and your B. So in a way, it was extremely beneficial
I
to
get it.
keep it in the right place,
Wow.
because Carmen was militant almost about how I approached F, G into A flat, not opening it too much, not making it too heavy, keeping it in that narrower place. Because you can sing it 4 different ways, but the question is, what's it setting you up to do?
Hmm.
So
Who was
keep
your
it in that place.
Who was your favorite tenor of all time? If you,
I'd have to say maybe Björling. I
oh,
related to Björling. I mean, he made me just, I don't know, I was a little bit of a bull in the shop. And
hmm.
so it's dangerous for me to listen to even Di Stefano or others. I was not allowed to listen to Corelli. Literally was
that can
forbidden
that
from
can
listening
get you
to
in trouble
Corelli
for
because it would
sure.
just put me in the wrong. I would just oh, open up and go. And so I loved that. I never actually related well to Gigli, even though I loved the lyricism, but it's not something I related well to. So I would always look for
Mm,
Björling. I didn't do a lot of art song recitals back when, but Wunderlich is just, the dream
hmm.
of just that easy song production. And it
That's
relates to a
true.
lot of many, many opera roles.
That
So,
is
and Pavarotti, of
true.
course.
Yeah.
Pavarotti, I found that position, doing when I started doing a lot of Donizetti recitativos, and you know the way he approached those recitativos to me just made so much sense. Lucia, perdona, se adora inusitata. It was just like so clear, so clean, and it was just like, oh, just do that. And again, his approach to once you get up to an A, because that was to me
Right.
that was the goal was behave myself through G or A flat, and then once I got to A, I was happy and everything went.
Hmm.
I don't know if you have time for a real quick story with Beverly.
Absolutely.
And I'm talking a little out of school with Beverly, but I think it's interesting for singers. I was there for 2 or 3 years already, and she wanted me to do Battaglia di Legnano,
Hmm.
the early Verdi score. And I said, I don't. I looked at it. I said, I don't really think it fits me. And the reason was it had all these climaxes on G instead of
Mm.
A. Okay, and that put me in a bad place.
Hmm.
It was always the right choice for me not to do that. Um,
Well,
so
great
I
that you
didn't do
had
it.
the wisdom.
Yeah, I'll share. I love Beverly to death. Okay, but she had a job to do, and it's the
Hmm.
lesson for young singers is the intendant has a job to do. They got a
Hmm.
calendar. To fill. And she said, "Well, look at it again." I said, "Okay, I'll look at it again." And I took it to Carmen Payton, and I didn't like it. So I went to her office again. And I said, "Let's. I really don't want to do it. I really don't think it fits." And so I left. Well, evidently Beverly, after I left, went to the other office and said, "Oh, by the way, Leach turned down Battaglia wisely. She knew I really probably doesn't fit exactly. She had a calendar, and I appreciate that and respect that. And I would have
Wow.
probably done fine, but it was not ideal.
I gotcha. I made that big mistake one time when I took a lot of Lakmes because I had the top that kept
Uh-huh.
wanting to push me into these really high rolls, and
Right.
I had 3 kids at home and a wife, so I took it. Then the other cast got sick, the tenor, and I ended up doing 6 performances in a row. That took me like 2 months to recover from doing that,
Yeah.
and I'm
Interesting.
and I'm
Yeah.
like big mistake. So
Yeah, when I went
kudos.
to debut, when I did my European debut at Deutsche Oper in the Huguenots, Die
Ah,
Hugenotten in
and
German,
you sang a D, right?
the D flat. It's a D
A
flat
D flat.
in the grand duet. And again, but it's well written, and I just sort of somehow let it go.
Wow.
You know, 3/4 of the way through the opera. Through the difficult opera. I asked Beverly, should I go audition for them for this Huguenots? They're going to fly me over. She said, "Well, you know Meyerbeer." I said, "No, I don't know Meyerbeer." That's what I'm asking. And it's one of those things. It happened to fit. It's a very high role, a very unique, difficult role, but it's one that happened to fit as soon as I started singing.
Wow.
So singers need to trust what they feel about a role.
Yeah.
It does it not, and the Fox system doesn't always tell you precisely.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I should have done a little bit more saying with Puccini. That's
We
what
all
fit
did
myself.
roles that maybe weren't exactly. Hoffman's the role that I had great successes with Hoffman.
You did.
It's the
Yes.
role I gave up the most. I quit Hoffman so many
Wow.
times. Every time I did it, almost I quit. But it actually most of it fit really really well. And it makes me nuts though when there's 2 or 3 pages or some percentage of the opera that you just go like this just doesn't
Oh.
makes me crazy. And it was actually my big role debut at Binghamton. I sang Hoffman
Amazing.
at 23. It was the first big
Oh,
role I did. And luckily, I didn't know
what?
how hard it was then. I just sang.
You did it. Yeah. Well, and you had the instrument to make it happen. My brother, we got to run. I can see the time. It's like 60
Yep.
seconds. God bless you. Thank you so much for the treasures you've given to this world. And folks, you can hear this interview on the podcast sites, all of them. Also on YouTube, you can see the video version on the Daniel Hendrick Experience. Then go to my website, danielhendrick.com, get a copy of the book that tells my story of losing my voice, getting it back, and singing all over the world. Richard,
Daniel,
you're
caro,
awesome. Caro
great,
io.
great.
Mille grazie, fratello mio.
Anche a te. Ciao.
Quando escucho música